about to hear coming from your radio is not a mistake.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, monster kids of all ages and persuasions, this is the podcast devoted to the classic and sometimes not so classic genre cinema of yesteryear. This is the Bride of Monster Kid Radio, episode 20, and we're kicking things off with the song Boneyard Beach from the band The Creepy Tikis. This comes from their new EP release, Doom Lagoon. You can find out more about the band over at thecreepytikis.bandcamp.com. Creepy is spelled with a K. You can also find them on Facebook under Creepy Tikis, or even their own YouTube channel. However you check them out, let them know that you heard about them here on Bride of Monster Kid Radio. Big thanks to them for letting us play them here on the show this week. My name is Turek M. Cook. I'm your writer, host, and producer of this here show. And I'm excited to have you here because we're going to get our Dan Curtis on. I am excited because we dove into the, it's not fair to call it an archive yet because the audio hasn't been aired, operative word being yet, because I have a recording that Steve Turek did for me a while back with Penny Dreadful. That's right, Penny Dreadful, one of my favorite horror hosts. She is probably best known in the horror host circle as, well, Penny Dreadful of Penny Dreadful's Shilling Shockers, but she's also a podcaster, and I guess technically a YouTuber because she puts her podcast on YouTube. It's The Terror at Collinwood. It's all about Dark Shadows, which, if you're a monster kid, you know what Dark Shadows is. If this is the first time you've heard of Dark Shadows, let me assure you, it is super cool. It is a soap opera from the 60s and 70s, and it was gothic, and it was spooky, and it had monsters and ghosts and vampires and all sorts of really cool stuff. And this week, courtesy of Steve and Penny, we're going to revisit a film that we talked about here on the show several years ago. I'm talking about Dan Curtis's feature film version of Dark Shadows. It's called The House of Dark Shadows. Steve and Penny get into the movie. They talk about why it's important to them, what they like about it, a few things that maybe one of them didn't quite like as much, but it's a great conversation. It's a lot of fun. Plus, of course, we've got the Beta Capsule review. Mark Matsky is getting our Ultraman action on here with Ultraman Ace. We're going to talk about an episode of Ultraman Ace with Mark. And before we get into the rest of the show, I have a voicemail from Captain Billy. Now, normally, I play Captain Billy's voicemails as, well, a bit of feedback. But this time around, before we get into the rest of the show, he's got something to say about modeling, which is really cool. I know that monster kids, at least the original monster kids, that would sit around watching TV to get their horror fix, see the horror host, reading things like Famous Monsters of Filmland, that sort of thing. Another thing that they did was make monster models, specifically the Aurora models. Now, I never got into doing models all that much growing up, and it's not something that I'm really knowledgeable about. Fortunately, it sounds like Captain Billy is. He's got some thoughts about models, and we're going to play that here.
Captain Billy here. Curse of the Faceless Man. I had never heard of this movie. And then last month in February, Escape Hatch Hobbies put out a model kit of said Curse of the Faceless Man. And their tagline was to sell this thing. If you've ever seen a mummy movie, you've seen Curse of the Faceless Man. And I bring it up because I was going to call about this when you mentioned you were doing this movie last week. And I said, it's just Captain Billy and his silly model kit hobby. And then all of a sudden, your guest mentioned that there was a model kit available for this. So I don't know if the website is currently active. Look, when it comes to these small model kit companies nowadays, it's usually a one-man operation. If you go to the website, they say that something's wrong with the site. I couldn't make it work for me last night. But there is a gallery available. It would be model kits that their customers have built and sent pictures back. So they make exclusive kits to themselves, and again, they also do replacement parts. Let's say you have your old school Aurora model kit of Dracula, or one of the many, many, many reproductions from the last 60 years. And you don't like the way Dracula's head looks. You got a copy, you got one of them, they did an issue about 20 years ago. They didn't want to pay the Bela Lugosi estate, so they put this, it literally looked like a balloon head. I mean, like an inflated balloon on the body of the Dracula kit. So let's say you get one of these and you don't like the head. You can go to Escape Hatch Hobbies, and there are other companies, I don't work for them, but I'm just pointing this out. And you can get a replacement head. You can get one that actually looked like Bela Lugosi. You can get a giant Carradine head with the top hat. You can get a small accessory kit that can turn it into the Tomb of Dracula Marvel comic book Dracula. And they do that for all the kits. If you get the Dr. Jekyll kit, Dr. Jekyll, that's a whole other phone call. You can get a myriad. You can make him the Fly, and you can make him the Invisible Man. You can make him all kinds of things. So, again, Escape Hatch Hobbies. I don't know if you can see the kit, but, you know, I believe it's like down until the summer. And that kit is brand new, so I don't think there's any example. There are not any examples on the gallery page. And if you're looking to get back into modeling, if you're an old man, you did it when you were a kid, now you're retired, and you've got some time on your hands. I was thinking about this. The best place to start, FineScaleModeler.com. FineScaleModeler.com. It's a magazine that's been around since the early 80s. They just celebrated their 40th anniversary. And that's where I ended up when I was trying to get back into this a few years, 2 or 3 decades ago now. It will tell you what you need to buy. They recommend, your entry level, your intermediate level, your advanced level. They will tell you what to do, they will guide you through the beginning of getting back into modeling. It leans into military model kits, your tanks, your ships, your airplanes. But there is a lot of information there. I mean, in the last few years, they have expanded into everything. There's a lot of spaceships, a lot of Enterprises, your Warhammer model kits, your Gundam, and your monster kit. So yeah, all kinds of stuff. So if you're interested in getting back into modeling, I recommend going to FineScaleModeler.com. You might be able to find the magazine. There's still a physical magazine. You might be able to find it on the newsstand near you.
He mentioned Escape Hatch Hobbies. I went and checked it out. Escape Hatch Hobbies right now, due to some personal stuff happening behind the scenes, they are on hiatus during the summer of 2025. But Captain Billy's right. They've got a gallery. Y'all should check that out to see some of the cool stuff they've got going on. I'll make sure there's a link in the show notes to that, as well as a link to Fine Scale Modeler. Just go to finescale.com. That's going to take you straight there. And I think that's really cool. And anytime anybody is involved in making models of monsters, I would love to hear about it. Do you have experience doing this sort of thing? Did you build the original Aurora models? Are you a modeler now? Do you do any of these custom sets? I'd love to hear more about it. And I'd really love to see your models. So why don't you email me pictures of what you've created over at monsterkidradio@gmail.com. And, maybe we'll talk more about monster models in the future. But we've got the rest of this week's episode to get through before we do any of that. So let's get into that right now.
It all begins as a summer vacation. A young family finds a beautiful old house. It could be the answer to their dreams.
So you are the people who want to rent this house?
Well, you mean it's $900 and then it's all ours?
Or the beginning of a nightmare. Burnt Offerings, starring Karen Black.
Are you actually trying to tell me that this house is responsible?
Oliver Reed.
This house is destroying us.
Betty Davis.
This house is getting so cold.
Burgess Meredith.
This house will be here long, long after you have departed, you believe me?
Eileen Heckert.
When it comes alive, tell them what it's like.
Burnt Offerings, from United Artists. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested.
Of all the horror stories ever told, one towers above them all. The original masterpiece of the macabre. The undeniable terror of Bram Stoker's Dracula. that spreads its shadow of darkness across Europe to Victorian England. A terrifying love story that reaches back into the dead past. A nightmare that stalks through the centuries to embrace the living.
Can't you at least tell me something?
If the cause of your fiancé's affliction is what I think it is, then beside it the most venomous serpent in the world would seem a plaything for children.
No. You're dead.
Many motion pictures claim to be horrific. Now comes one which reaches a new height in unabated terror. The Bram Stoker masterpiece, Dracula.
Live from the Land of Light in Nebula M78, home of the mighty Ultra Heroes, it's Monster Kid Radio's Beta Capsule Review. Ultraman Ace, Episode 34, A Terrible Monster Dances on a Rainbow Over the Sea. While investigating ships that have vanished at sea, Hokuto rescues a boy adrift in the ocean. He learns that his name is Yuji, and he and his sister appear to be orphaned, although Yuji doesn't realize his father is dead. Neighborhood kids inform Hokuto that the brother and sister have changed dramatically since the loss of their parents, and Yuji is observed collecting shells on the beach. When he's asked why, Yuji says that when he's collected 1,000 shells, he believes his father will come home. To take Yuji's mind off this mournful task, Hokuto enlists the help of Dan Numezu to join Yuji in a game of baseball, but Yuji wanders off, drawn to the beach once more. Suspecting a link between the shells and a terrible monster, Tak rushes to rescue Yuji, who's commandeered a rowboat, and sure enough, sea monster Katai Gagan emerges from the depths. After the monster is driven away, Yuji learns the truth about his father and is devastated. Will Hokuto be able to revive the boy's spirit and defeat terrible monster Katai Gagan? Episode 34, which made its debut on November 24th, 1972, continues the trend of making children main characters in the story, which ramped up considerably with the departure of Minami in episode 28. That does not mean this episode is childish. On the contrary, it offers a moving and fairly mature portrayal of childhood grief, and examines the wisdom of withholding the truth from young people. In the midst of such heavy themes, A Terrible Monster Dances on a Rainbow Over the Sea features a colorful and well-designed monster, top-notch effects work, and a number of well-framed shots, many filmed at oceanfront locations. In addition, Captain Ryu states the renewed focus of the series when he tells the crew and the audience, Tak is an ally to kids. If there's anything that robs a child of his courage to live, that's a Tak enemy worse than terrible monsters. For Monster Kid Radio's Beta Capsule Review, This is Mark Mansky reporting.
Is it possible for one man to have been responsible for a series of unsolved homicides spanning a period of over a century? Watch The Night Strangler, a chilling story of suspense, starring Dara McGavin on the Tuesday Movie of the Week.
This is the dead of night. It has nothing to do with time. It can happen in sunshine or in moonlight, in the best of weather or the worst. For the dead of night is a state of mind. That dark, unfathomed region of the human consciousness from which all the unknown terrors of our lives emerge. The dead of night exists in all of us, and no one knows at what strange, unexpected moment it will make itself known. And so, tonight, for your entertainment, 3 tales, one of mystery, one of imagination, and one of terror.
Come back to Collinwood, that house of dark shadows, where life and death go on as usual. A bodiless spirit. A witch is hanged in the garden.
Dirty witch.
She'll be back. The deranged, sadistic killer does his thing. Night of dark shadows. Death kept their love alive.
This is Count Dracula, and I'm here to offer you a friendly warning. Derek and his guests often get excited, and occasionally this results in revealing key plot points of the movies they're discussing. You know how the children of the night, monster kids can get sometimes. So consider yourself warned. And don't come begging to me to kill them for their transgressions afterward. I have more pressing issues to take care of, like that pesky Van Helsing.
Hello everybody, I'm Monster Kid Radio. This is Steve Rivers. That's right, normally I'm Steven Turek, but when I sub for Derek, I'm Steve Rivers, just like Joan Rivers sub for Johnny Carson. You know, that's just the way we roll. And I was lucky enough to get the one and only, the spooky, horrific, mean. Nah, she's never mean. She's nice. She's kind, but still scary on the inside. Penny Dreadful.
Hello there, Steve. You're such a flatterer. If you could see, I'm blushing beneath my pallor, my cold pallor. There's a slight blush. Thank you.
I was gonna say it's just one like a mild, a different shade of white to
Jaundice.
To a little bit of yellow, a little jaundice. It actually fits rather well, yes.
Nice to see you again, Steve. How are you?
It's good to see you too, Penny. But as we also know, you're also Danielle. So I don't know which
dreaded alter ego.
Yes, the dreaded alter ego. Do you use a formula to change yourself back and forward, or is it just a supernatural thing?
It depends. It depends on the phase of the moon. Oh, the werewolves are out. Hold on a second here. So now that the werewolves have been put back in their kennels, I've surrounded the place with silver pentagrams so that they will not attack again.
I never knew that you were having a territorial battle with the werewolves in your area. So it's I guess this has been going on for a long time or something recent.
Oh, it's my in-laws, Garu's family. They're just, we won't get into that,
I was to say, I thought you were ring good.
Family drama.
There's always, I guess one's not a normal werewolf. One must be a drama llama werewolf.
Exactly. You nailed it.
They got bit by a llama. Now they turn into a llama every time there's a full moon. I don't know. Who knows?
That's true. It could be worse. It could be Alpacula, the vampire alpaca. So we're already off to a good start here. Don't you think so, Steve?
I think so. But Penny, besides being a horror host, that's not one, but two different rondos over the years, you also host your own podcast, which talks about Dark Shadows. If you want to talk about that for a minute to let listeners know where they can go to get all their Dark Shadows information.
Absolutely, Steve. Thank you. It's called Terror at Collinwood. It's you can find it at terroratcollinwood.com. It's free on all the podcast apps, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. And on YouTube, there is a video version of the podcast as well, where I often show off images and exclusive reveals and things like that. Interviews with the actors from the show, crew members, fans about different storylines and licensed media like the comics and the novels. And it's been a lot of fun. I've been doing it a little over 3 years. And I've had the pleasure of having you on it with Jeff Owens from the Classic Horrors Club podcast. And we had a lot of fun talking about the monsters of Dark Shadows. It's been fun. Please check it out if you're a Dark Shadows fan or you like gothic horror or spooky stuff, 60s pop culture. Please check it out.
Look at those trees. How lovely they look reflected in the sunlight.
Barnabas, I love to be with you. You have a way of looking at things. As if they were completely new to you. As if you'd never seen them before.
Some people live in boxes all their lives.
You know, I feel I'm beginning a whole new life. And you're responsible for that life. I can't tell you how exciting it is to be with you.
Barnabas Collins, vampire, takes a bride in a bizarre act of unnatural love. House of Dark Shadows from MGM. Come see how the vampires do it.
Rated GP, all ages, parental guidance.
The movie we picked, House of Dark Shadows, which obviously I feel like I'm in the hands of a guru with that, with somebody who knows all the stuff there is compared to me, a neophyte, a novice, of the Dark Shadows lore. You are by far, you're like a black belt and I'm a white belt with like the little stripes at the end or whatever, very much just above novice.
I love House of Dark Shadows. I'm always down to talk about House of Dark Shadows. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. And so I am always on board for that. I love House of Dark Shadows.
It's easy to love. Obviously, you being a huge Dark Shadows fan, doing a Dark Shadows podcast, when was your first time seeing House of Dark Shadows? What was your first encounter?
House of Dark Shadows, I knew about well before I ever saw it because I've talked about on my podcast, my uncle Valdemar. He was, he came to America in the 60s. He got into he was a kid, he was like 10. He got into all the pop culture in the 60s and became a huge Dark Shadows fan. So when I came around in the early 70s, I was immediately like indoctrinated into the classic horror stuff. Like he'd go to the theater and watch all the Hammer movies and he saw House of Dark Shadows. So I remember him talking about House of Dark Shadows and saying, oh, Barnabas is really mean in House of Dark Shadows. It's really scary, So I finally got to see it for myself it was like Superstation TBS. You remember they used to show around Halloween, I think it was, they used to show tons of horror movies and it was on late at night. I remember they showed House of Dark Shadows and Night of Dark Shadows. I remember seeing it in the TV guide. I'd always look through the TV. I'm sure you did this too, flipping through the TV guide with a pen and circling all the movies that you wanted to watch that week. And in October, it was like just a bonanza of movies. It was like I was circling like every other thing, and so that was when I first saw was on I think it was Superstation TBS. Late at night, and I loved it. And of course, in that version of it, they cut it down a lot for the commercials and stuff. That was like edited quite a bit, but it was so cool to finally get to see that movie on TV and Night of Dark Shadows too. Because my uncle liked House of Dark Shadows. He didn't like Night of Dark Shadows. I remember him telling me it was boring. He's like, "Oh, Night of Dark Shadows is boring. I kind of dug Night of Dark Shadows too, even though it's heavily edited. James Aubrey made Dan Curtis cut so much out of the film, and I'm really excited for Darren Gross and the possibility that restored director's cut of Night of Dark Shadows will be released. But even then, I liked both movies. I recorded them. I watched them many times over the years. I just rewatched them again very recently, not too long ago. I rewatched them. I love this series. The series is my number one love, the TV series. But I probably second is House, just because it's like everybody who was involved with the TV series doing a Hammer version almost of the show. And it was terrifying, so many characters that you love get slaughtered, get killed off in the show. It's shocking, absolutely shocking. Watching that, I remember the shock I was feeling watching that. I'm like, oh my God, they killed this character. This character got turned into a vampire. Oh my goodness, what's going on here? And I know that made a lot of people sad too, but I kind of think of it, Dark Shadows always had parallel time. They had parallel universes. And I just think of this as this is a parallel universe. It's one of the parallel time you could go into in that room where I always think of it if Sarah Collins, the ghost of Sarah, never started appearing, and as Barnabas kind of develops more of a conscience because of what's going on with Sarah and everything, this is what would have happened. This is what it would have ended this way, as the Barnabas his conscience was still there, but it wasn't really prominent, And that's what kind of what Dan Curtis initially wanted to do with Barnabas anyway, is she wanted him to be much more like he is in House of Dark Shadows. I love it. It's not my ideal version of Dark Shadows. It's not my ideal depiction of those characters, but it's so much fun that they all got together and made this movie, and it looks like Dan Curtis made a Hammer movie, basically, is what I think of it as.
Yeah, I can see that. And unlike you and most people, when I grew up, I was born in the late 60s and grew up through the 70s and 80s. I did not have, we had no cable TV. I didn't get cable TV till I was in my late 20s. And it wasn't even cable TV, it was satellite TV. So I've never really had this cable TV experience that everybody sometimes talks about growing up. I was still stuck with whatever was on the network stations and that kind of thing. So I didn't see House of Dark Shadows until several years ago. So that was my first time watching it. And I watched that after I did watched all the Dark Shadows episodes in a few months. And I just decided, well, I might as well just continue on. So I just did all the movies and then, of course, the revival series and stuff like that. It was interesting because I just watched all the episodes on the show and I go in the House of Dark Shadows, which to me, I enjoyed it a lot, but it seemed like story-wise that they're trying to condense all the highlights. Let's pick all the big focus points of Barnabas and stuff in the story, and let's throw it into a 90-ish minute movie, and that's good and bad.
I know what you're saying. Yeah.
As I think somebody watching the movie for the first time, they're going to see, and not knowing anything with Dark Shadows, that they just came into the movie cold.
Yeah.
That there's a lot of shorthand that's expected for people to know that they don't really give the time to let it develop and let it feel out. So there's the movie critical part of me looks at it that way, but the Dark Shadows fan of me understands it all and is able to flow with it. So I'm trying to look at it with both lenses, and there's things I really love about the movie, and there's things I wish that, I'm glad you put it in there so we got to see it, but I'm thinking for somebody else, maybe you should have left that off and then fleshed out some of these other subplots or main plots going on so we could really get into what's going on with Barnabas. I think there should have been more of the Barnabas-Maggie relationship and maybe not Caroline being turned into the vampire, as I think that part took like 10, 15 minutes out of the movie that it could have been focused on other things and made for, to me, a better film. But if you already are familiar with Dark Shadows, you're going to love it the way it goes because it's like, oh, this never happened in the TV show. Now what's going to happen? So it's kind of, I'm torn.
I still think it works well, even as just a vampire movie. If somebody came into it and hadn't seen Dark Shadows and watched House of Dark Shadows, I think it still works as a vampire movie on its own. But I know what you're saying. It's like they did this with the 91 series too. It was like the greatest hits of Dark Shadows. Like Dan Curtis just took the things that people remembered from the show and emphasized those things. And House of Dark Shadows, it's all like it is condensed into those 90 minutes. And they even had cut some stuff out of the film that I think would have helped it flow better too. Like there's like one sequence where Barnabas had set it up so Jeff Clark is out of town to get him out of the way, and they cut that out of the movie, that whole bit where Jeff's out of town and doing this thing that Barnabas, it's because in the movie Barnabas says that he's not going to do anything to him. In fact, I've done something for him, that kind of, and we never actually saw what he did for him. And they cut other things out of the movie, like the David hanging in the closet to scare Maggie. And I remember my uncle telling me he saw a picture of it, and of course that picture was reprinted during that time, so you expect to see it in the film. And he seemed like in his memory, he remembered seeing that, and he thought Barnabas was the one who did that to David. And he's like, Barnabas is really mean. He killed David. He hung him in the closet. I was like, that's not what happened in the movie. It was David pretended to hang himself to scare Maggie, but that was cut out of the film. Although some people claim to have seen it in the preview screening of the film, that it was in there, and then they cut it out. But that footage is gone, like it doesn't exist. Like I think it was destroyed after it was cut from the film. And I can see why they cut it, because it's like, well, kids might do this to try to scare their parents or something like that. But that doesn't add anything really to the plot of the film, unlike the Jeff Clark thing, which I think would have added an important element to it. But like, you got all your characters, so many of the key characters from the show are in it. Definitely some like key moments from the show are in it, with Willie releasing Barnabas from the coffin, and Barnabas, the lookalike with Maggie Evans, who looks like Josette, and Barnabas fixating on her, Dr. Julia Hoffman, trying to cure Barnabas of vampirism, which is just a bananas idea, which I think we were talking about the other day. I think that came from House of Dracula, that the idea of the mad scientist trying to cure the vampire of vampirism. They brought Dick Smith in again to do the makeup, because he did the old man Barnabas makeup in the show, but it was more limited in terms of the budget of what he could do, even though it still looked sensational. But in the movie, there was a little bit more he could work with. He used a little big man makeup from Dustin Hoffman, and that's one of the most terrifying images I've ever seen in any vampire movie, of is old man Barnabas. And in fact, Don posted said that as a mask. They didn't call it Barnabas, they just called it old man vampire, but it was old man Barnabas makeup. So it's just some like very memorable imagery in the film, but it's definitely a much darker film. It's a much more nihilistic kind of a film, and it's cold. It's a colder film. The TV show is like an escape, even though it's scary and there are werewolves and vampires, and you probably will die if you live in Collinsport. It's still kind of, there's like a mystical escape quality to the show, whereas this is not. No, it doesn't feel like an escape. I don't want to live in that Collinwood. It's cool. I love Lyndhurst. It's beautiful, but it's like that does not look like an escape to me. It's like a death trap, basically. Like, so many people die in that movie.
Pretty much, I mean, you just don't want to visit a certain location. Yeah, I think if you visit a lot of other parts of the town, you'll be okay in this particular movie. I think it's fixated in one general spot from what we saw. One thing I love about this movie that Dan Curtis did is the opening credits, because that whole opening just sets everything up so well, where some movies, you don't use the opening credits at all. You just see the stuff, you see some generic images or just the credits scroll by. But this one interwoven it with Maggie Evans being introduced, David, of course, being introduced, Willie, being in there. And then, of course, Barnabas making his partial appearance during that, but other characters too are all showing up in there, and you're getting an idea what's going on. So we're seeing all the main characters going through the motions of the opening and how everybody's being established. So if you were watching this for the first time, you're introduced to all the principles, but I think it's good because it just keeps things moving along, because I think he knew he only had 90-ish minutes to do it, and he didn't want to waste any time trying to get all these greatest hits in there. So I think that was smart filmmaking.
It was kind of remarkable that they were able to include that many characters from the show in the movie and still keep it coherent in a way that flowed well and kept it moving at a pretty steady clip. It was kind of relentless, actually. It was just like goes from boom, boom, one thing to the other. That very blood and thunder kind of a style, which is totally Dan Curtis in a nutshell right there. That's his first movie that he ever directed. He had directed a few episodes of the show because he wanted to learn how to do it. So, Leela Swift, he took her aside, like, okay, I'm going to show me how to do this, show me how to do that. And he directed several episodes of the show, a few, not a ton. And then this was the first movie he made. Some people don't like Dan Curtis' style. Like, he always has that shot where, like with Professor Stokes driving the wooden stake to stake Carolyn. And it's like from Professor Stokes' point of view as the hand comes down. Dan Curtis loved shots like that. I like those kind of things, though. It's just, it's not subtle. I get it, but it's just very Dan Curtis. Like, you can tell right away, okay, this is a Dan Curtis movie, especially with the Robert Colbert's music playing. But it's just like, it hits all the right notes. And Professor Stokes, who I love in the show, he's great in this too. He's even more Van Helsing. He's the Van Helsing of Dark Shadows, but he's like really owns that in this movie. But then with the twist too, where he too becomes a vampire. It's like everybody else, you either get killed, become a vampire, or you end up catatonic. I don't know if Dan Curtis was like, I just want to kill everybody. I'm sick of these people. I'm kill them all. I've been seeing these people every day for years, since 1966. Let's kill them all. But it's still, I know Jonathan Frid hated the movie. Jonathan Frid did not like House of Dark Shadows. He, even at the time, during like press interviews and things, he said negative stuff about the film that he started. And I get it, because Jonathan Frid was not, the character in the show, like you pointed out, they had more time to really explore all the nuances of the characters. Barnabas was really multifaceted in the show. Jonathan Frid liked playing the gray area of Barnabas. He could be really bad sometimes, or he could be selfless sometimes. It was a nice mix. The movie version, you don't really get to do that. You got 90 minutes, and he's a marauder. He's a predator, and he could be that in the show too. But he could also be really tragic, and selfless as well. But this is a much darker take on the character, and Frid didn't like that. He thought it was also too gory. And it is gory, but not by today's standards. Now I can't watch some of these movies with you're watching guts and torture and all this kind of brains flying everywhere. There wasn't like that. I can't do that kind of stuff. This is, to me, is like Hammer level gore, which I can do that. It's like blood. It's like that. And it's so, that red Hammer blood, where it's so vividly red. It's like, it almost looks surreal or something. It doesn't look like it's almost real blood. It's like fantasy blood. So to me, it was, by today's standards, I don't think it's that too extremely gory. By 1970 standards, I think it probably was even more shocking at that time to see that kind of blood in Dark Shadows.
Well, but I think, like you said, it's Hammer-esque, and with the amount of blood that they're showing. And I think it fits because it's the early 70s. A lot of movies and TVs and horror films are changing. This is all the late 60s, early 70s. So everything is in that flux, where the Gothic type movies are pretty much making their last stand for as being the huge impact that they are. They're still done today, but this is the heyday for them is pretty much at the end. And so Dan Curtis, obviously trying to keep an eye on the pulse of what's going on, knows he's got a movie, knows he doesn't have to worry about TV standards, so he can actually go for it a little more, and he wants to see how the vampires do it. So, of course.
See how the vampires do it.
It's the most lurid, ridiculous tagline of any vampire movie. Come see how the vampires do it. My favorite tagline, because they had a couple. My favorite one was, House of Dark Shadows. Nobody lives there.
But everybody always thinks of it and how the vampires do it as the more innuendo type thing. And I'm looking at it as the aspect, okay, this is how the vampires do it, with the blood, the constant wanting of having the flesh, and that kind of thing. And I think so that's the way I'm interpreting it. But I mean, things could be used multiple ways, but this movie doesn't go there in that aspect, which movies in the 80s, late 70s and 80s would definitely do, with especially more of the eroticism going on into that, or the mixture of the horror and eroticism, which was starting in this particular decade. So so this is a good gateway. But I really enjoyed the cinematography. I enjoyed that it was in nice vivid color, that we're seeing all the stuff going on. The one ding I will give it in its cinematography is there are just, I don't mind day for night, but if you're going to show night for night, and then the next thing you cut, it's now day for night, and it's obviously day. It's very jarring, and they did that a couple of times, and I'm thinking, oh, come on. It'd be one way or the other, because the one time when, and of course we're spoiling different things, but when Professor Stokes is now the vampire, that scene is so dark, it's hard to see, like, what is going on, with it.
Yeah.
And then the next scene with Jeff Clark, it's day for night, and it's like, oh, I could see everything now. It's like, geez, that would have been nice just a few minutes ago.
Yeah. It looked like they shot that scene with Professor Stokes, and must have been dusk or something. It must have been really pretty late in the shooting for that day. But yeah, I know what you're saying, and I wonder if it's even more noticeable on a Blu-ray versus seeing like a print of the film screened at a theater. I wonder how much that contrast would show. I've never seen it like in a movie theater. I'd love to see it like actually projected on a film reel onto a screen and see how that would look. I haven't experienced that. I would like to at some point. But yeah, I know what you're saying. But just to touch on a couple of things you mentioned, the cinematography was done by Arthur Ornitz, who did an incredible job with the cinematography on the film. He just really nailed it. And you also mentioned spoilers as we talk. One thing that really strikes me in a way that is unbelievable compared to what you would see today, the trailer for House of Dark Shadows. Have you ever watched the trailer for House of Dark Shadows?
Yes, I have. And
it spoils so many things that happen in the movie. Like, if I saw that trailer before seeing the movie, I would know, like, Carolyn's a vampire, Professor Stokes is a vampire, and there were so many things that were spoiled in that trailer that I don't think they would show if that movie were made now. Like, that would just really kind of ruin certain surprises in the film.
I've seen so many trailers for current movies that spoiled virtually the whole movie.
Really?
In the trailer.
Okay, well,
so it's
maybe
it's amazing. If you watch a movie, it's like, well, what's the point of seeing the movie now? You just pretty much get, and including the twist. Like, if it's a movie with a twist or has some of the twist, you can see it. Especially those of us that have seen enough movies over the years, we know. Now, sometimes you're still surprised, but so many of these trailers give away the goods. This one is an interesting, because you brought it up. You're doing a movie based on the soap opera show, which people have been watching for years, and here it's going on, and you're doing, as we both said, the greatest hits type version of the Barnabas storyline, and hitting all the high points, all the good stuff, which is excellent stuff to mine from. So for anybody that's a Dark Shadows fan, you already kind of knew what's going to happen, but like you said, the stuff you wouldn't know, Caroline, and it's like we're just gonna, but they also knew the Dark Shadows fans are still going to see it anyway. I guess part of it was showing it that it's not going to be totally with the storyline from before. They weren't going to be devoted to it. That, hey, look, we did this and this, and people were like, well, why did that happen? I got to find out. Like, what else happened if that happened? And so it could work.
I can see that. I can see that from that perspective. That's a good point because I could see somebody saying, well, I've seen all this stuff on the show, but then you see Carolyn's a vampire and Professor Stokes and Roger or whatever. Like, what? Holy moly, what's going on here? Like, this didn't happen in the show. And Carolyn was great as a vampire. She was Nancy Barrett, and she's proud of that too. She talks about, she's like, I was a great vampire, and she was excellent as the vampire Carolyn. But it was sad. It was like it's a sad feeling when you watch the film because you love those characters. You've been watching them for years. And I also understand that because I did feel sad watching all those characters get killed off. But I just kept thinking, well, this doesn't affect the show. It's a parallel universe version of it. That's why, like, when Barnabas gets staked, it's like, wow, that's a legit staking right there. Although I guess Jeff Clark missed the heart if you watch the post-credit scene on the or Willie is the one who puts the stake in him, and then but there's a very early version of
Of course, Willie would screw it up. Come on, it's Willie.
Yeah, totally, exactly. Nice job there, Willie. You missed. Like if you just grazed the heart, but yeah, we're jumping at the very end of the film, but nobody talks about that. You watch the credits. That at the end, he turns into a bat and he takes off. His body disappears and he turns into a bat and he takes off, which because they were setting it up to do a sequel. Originally, Dan Curtis was planning to bring Jonathan Frid back to free Barnabas, and the rumor is that it was going to be a prequel to House of Dark Shadows. There was very little known about it, but people have been talking about. Ansel Farage posted on a classic horror film board that the little that is known, I believe, was they were talking about doing like maybe a 1795 kind of origin story kind of a thing. I don't know. And then I read somewhere else that it was going to be Barnabas continuing to pursue Maggie, but Catherine Lee Scott had left the country at that point to go live in Europe. So I don't know if in England. So I don't know if they would. Maybe she would have come back to make a movie though. They're like, well, we'll fly you out to make this sequel to House of Dark Shadows, but obviously it never happened. And there's no draft of this original sequel to the film, so we don't know for sure what it would have been.
Yeah, and you had Donald Briscoe as Todd Blake. So I mean, he was still alive I don't think he died during the movie. He slumped over when she died, so he survived. So that left the werewolf storyline still open if you wanted to have him to do that.
Don Briscoe,
if they were to continue on, then you'd have a like a Dracula versus Wolfman type thing with the Wolfman.
Sure. Or you could have done it with Quentin, which I'm surprised they didn't do in Night of Dark Shadows, because you could have had David Selvey come in as Quentin. That's the other thing too. Like when they were filming House of Dark Shadows, they were still making the show at the same time. They were writing House of Dark Shadows during the Leviathan's storyline. And then when they were shooting it, I mean, all of these principal actors had to be in Tarrytown to go film. And they were shooting the series in Manhattan. So what they did was they went into that's why they came up with parallel time. Barnabas gets locked in the coffin by the parallel version of William H. Loomis, the writer who wants to interview the vampire in his coffin. No, Anne Rice was a big Dark Shadows fan. I wonder where she got that idea from. So Barnabas was locked in his coffin, and then the parallel version of Quentin and Angelique become sort of the main stays in the storyline to kind of carry the load while they're filming House of Dark Shadows. So they have this daily production schedule going on for the show, and sometimes some of the actors would come in. They'd come back from Tarrytown for a few days. They'd be in like Hoffman or whoever, Maggie maybe would be in a couple of episodes, and then they'd have to go back to Tarrytown to film, and the beautiful filming locations that they used up in Sleepy Hollow and Lyndhurst. It was really cool.
Yeah, that's the hard part when you're doing two different productions going on. Luckily, the cast is huge enough where you can pull this off because you got a lot of resources that way, but you are straining your creative force a little more in that they're trying to pull off two big things. So it does make it a little tougher, but I mean, I think they're able to pull it off overall to where it was successful. Now, whether the Leviathan storyline was successful, I mean, I personally enjoyed that storyline, but I know some people they're off put by it. So it's
I liked it. I thought it was cool. I mean, it was a risk to do it, but to do H.P. Lovecraft as part of a Dark Shadow of a storyline, but I dug it. I thought it was really creepy and weird, and it captured the vibe, the Lovecraft vibe. I can see why people did complain about it though, because I think one of the key things in that storyline, Barnabas becomes a pawn to a higher power, to this ancient race of beings, and people didn't like that. And I get that, because it took away Barnabas's agency. He's suddenly like really this cold, brainwashed person who was helping the Leviathans. It's like, I can see why that would be problematic for people. And I think the tone of it was definitely, it came out of 1897, which is really colorful and wild and all this crazy stuff going on, and then you go into this like really chilling, weird storyline of Leviathans. But I don't know, I thought it was cool. I liked it. But it was, some people blame Leviathans not being, so this kind of goes off the rails at times, I think. People say because they were writing House of Dark Shadows at the same time. So they were kind of stretched to their limit. The writers were doing House of Dark Shadows, writing that, and writing the TV show at the same time. I can't imagine. I mean, that must have been so stressful, like to be writing both the show and the movie at the same time. Sam Holland, Gordon Russell, handling writing duties on the show and on the movie. It just must have been kind of bananas to do that. And then just going back and forth, to film the movie and do work on the show too for some of the actors. Have you been to the Lyndhurst estate before in Tarrytown, New York, in Sleepy Hollow?
No, I've never been up there.
No, it's beautiful. It's it's a museum now, and it's my favorite Collinwood is always going to be Seaview Terrace because it's just, you look at it, to me that's Collin. But I love Lyndhurst too. It's also its own version of Collinwood. It's a beautiful castle on the Hudson River, basically. But the grounds of Lyndhurst are exactly what I imagine the grounds of Collinwood would be. It's this sprawling, wooded area with these, just unbelievable, like beautiful grounds. And you could imagine late at night, in a misty, fog-shrouded night, like vampires and werewolves and ghosts, stalking the grounds of Lyndhurst. It's a beautiful place. Definitely worth going to, checking out that place because it's really unbelievable, really cool. And they filmed a lot. They filmed at the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery for the scene where Carolyn's funeral. Jerry Lacey, who's there, Reverend Trask, reading. They brought in a lot of the other actors to play like kind of smaller parts in the show. You see Humphrey Allen Estredo as a doctor, and Dennis Patrick shows up as Sheriff. Lisa Richards is there as Barnabas' first victim. It was kind of fun trying to spot some of those different actors from the show who played supporting roles.
That was the fun part for all the fans, is when you're watching it, you're like, oh, there's that person, and this. And the hardest part for me, I think, with the movie is, and I think when I was talking about certain character lines or storylines not being fleshed out as much as I wanted them to, as much as I enjoyed, like I said, Caroline being the vampire and this stuff, and I loved how she was not listening to Barnabas, where usually the minion vampire would always follow whatever the lead vampire is saying to do, but she was just like, nope, I'm doing this, even though it's going to lead me to be my doom. I'm going for my boyfriend, and I'm going to make sure he becomes with me, and that which ends up being her downfall. But because of that storyline, Grayson Hall, oh my God, I love Grayson Hall. Dr. Hoffman, she doesn't get a chance to develop that relationship with Barnabas that we really want to see. We hear it. We hear it spoken. Oh, I did not realize you love me so much. Yeah, it's a movie. We want to see it. You needed 5 minutes of scenes, like little scenes. It could have been 5 minutes of screen time, but done in like 3 or 4 smaller segments that would have shown us this budding thing. But again, because you only got 90 some odd minutes, and this, as we said, one of the things we love about this movie is it keeps moving. They basically, the romance elements, the stuff, I guess, that would really draw in soap opera type fans in general, or the gothic element, the romantic parts are not there as much as they are in the show. Now, of course, the show has multiple episodes every week. I'm just saying it just needed 5 minutes used well with different scenes, adding little parts to scenes or whatever, and you could have increased the storylines and made them flow better. But it depends what you want. And I'm just saying if I wanted to flesh out the characterization, I still enjoyed the movie, but I think it would have made it from a really good movie to a great movie if they would have had that in there.
I agree with what you're saying, especially with regard to Julia and Barnabas and really illustrating those feelings and making it clear that that's what's going on, but that they originally did have that in the film. It was one of the things that was cut from the film, along with the David in the closet and Jeff Clark going to the art show and all this kind of stuff. There was a scene with Barnabas and Julia after he was able to walk during the day, and there are pictures that exist of the scene of Grayson Hall and Jonathan Frid walking across the lawn and at the old house of the Lockwood Matthews mansion. It was just like on the grass, and they had a scene on dialogue. See, it's in the script. If you look, there's a book that Catherine Lee Scott put out by Pomegranate Press called The Dark Shadows Movie Book, and it contains the original scripts for both House of Dark Shadows and Night of Dark Shadows. And you can read the scenes that were cut from the film, but I think it would have benefited from keeping that scene in the movie. It's one of those scenes that really enriches the dynamic between Dr. Hoffman and Barnabas, and then why she betrays him, which is a different take in the show. It was Barnabas was insisting. It was Barnabas's fault that he aged. He forced Julia to increase the dosages and do it faster, and she warned him that he shouldn't do that. But in the movie, she becomes jealous of his attraction to Maggie and his attention to Maggie, and she undermines the treatments for Barnabas, and that she is responsible for him aging, and ultimately he kills her. Another, prominent character from the show who gets killed off, which in the show too, she was going to get killed off originally too. That Barnabas was going to get killed off in the show, Julia would. But they changed plans because those characters became popular in important parts of the show. But yeah, it's unfortunate. I wish that footage would turn up, but I think it was. I was talking to Darren Gross, who was, of course, responsible for finding the Night of Dark Shadows footage and restoring it. And I asked Darren about that footage, and he said he believes it doesn't exist. He thinks it was destroyed. He has never found it or any hint of it anywhere. So you never know, though. Could turn up someday. Who knows?
Stranger things have happened, and you never know. As you said, somebody could go back in time and do it to a parallel universe and bring it back, and then we have that parallel version where it's all intact. But they're missing some of our scenes that actually stayed in our dimension. So you put them together, and we got the ultimate version.
There you go. You solved it. Now all we have to do is go find that parallel time room in the East Wing and go find the correct parallel time where that footage exists.
The cast, we talked about some of the big players. I don't mean to sound like a Debbie. Maybe it's because I love so many of these actors and the way they portray it. I want them to have more screen time. And of course, nowadays that this film was done, it would be a 2 hour and 20-minute movie, because most movies seem to be 2 hours to 2.5 hours, and this would be fleshed out.
Yeah.
And but Fire David, Professor Stokes, I always felt like, he comes in, it's like, I wanted to see him and go in there and confront Barnabas. I wanted him to be with Jeff, and maybe he gets off, like Jeff's going to one part of the house, and then you see what happens to him. But it's done off screen, and we just see the end result. And I feel that's like,
I know.
Come on, I wanted to see what happened to him, and because I love these actors. You want to see, how did Barnabas overcome him? Professor Stokes, the vampire hunter, the one who knows all this stuff.
I would have loved to have seen that confrontation happen. That would have been so cool. Like Stokes confronting Barnabas. We were definitely denied that, because I think that would have been super cool. I always wanted to see that in the show, even too. Like Professor Stokes, kind of puts the pieces together and says, "Hey, I know about this." It would have been cool to have a scene like that in the movie. We would have had that opportunity, but we saw the outcome of what happened when Stokes confronts Barnabas. But definitely. And how did Barnabas get the better of Professor Stokes? How did that happen?
I sometimes have to go and remind myself my old mantra: you always want to be left wanting more than having a movie overstay its welcome. So if you wanted more of certain things and more of this and more of that, that means you were enjoying what you were getting, and you just wanted more of it. So I think a couple of the things I said would have made a little more sense to the storyline wise. I can't argue with, like I said, I really enjoy what we got. So, I don't want to send anybody like I'm being negative on the film. I'm just trying to be fair with it and trying to analyze it from the eyes of a Dark Shadows fan, and also looking at it through what a non-Dark Shadows fan would feel about this movie. And I think that'd be interesting. I'll have to watch it with one of my children hasn't seen it yet, just to say, okay, what do you think of this? And that doesn't know anything about anybody, and just get their POV.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I've shown it to a couple of my friends who had never watched the series, and they enjoyed it. They knew from talking to me over the years, like they had some idea of who the at least who Barnabas was. So, I mean, they enjoyed it when they watched it, and they had no previous viewing experience with the series. So, um, I'm I know some fans of the series definitely don't like House of Dark Shadows. It definitely more than Night of Dark Shadows. More of them like House of Dark Shadows than Night of Dark Shadows. But there are some fans who really dislike House of Dark Shadows for similar reasons. Probably Jonathan Fred didn't like it. It's just kind of more lurid and gruesome than the show is, and all these characters get killed off. There was a theory that it affected the ratings of the show too, because parents went to the theater to see the movie with their kids who loved the show, and they're like, "This is what Dark Shadows is. You can't. I'm not going to let you watch it anymore because it's too violent." That not discerning between what happens in the show versus what happened in the movie. So there is that theory. I've heard that bandied about quite a bit. I don't know how much truth there is to it. I don't know if there's really any way to honestly know whether that's the case or not, but it's certainly something that people have said over the years.
We're never going to know at this point. I mean, people can say it might affect it, but then there could have been other people that started to watch the show because they saw the movie. So you don't know how much did you gain and how much did you lose.
Especially since the movie was so successful. House of Dark Shadows did very well for MGM. They were very happy with the return on House of Dark Shadows, which is why you got Night of Dark Shadows too. Although I think Curtis initially went in to do 3 pictures, but the third never happened. Unfortunately, Night of Dark Shadows didn't do very well in comparison to House of Dark Shadows. But yeah, the movie did very well for MGM. There's a legend that it saved MGM from bankruptcy. I don't know if the House of Dark Shadows is solely responsible for saving MGM from bankruptcy, but it certainly didn't hurt. It definitely helped them during a low point in their financial standing at that time, and House of Dark Shadows brought in some money for them, so they were happy with it.
When the movie came out, what storyline was going on at that time in Dark Shadows? We talked about the storyline they were doing when they were making it, but when the movie came out, what was the storyline?
The storyline at that time was the summer of 1970. Well, there's debate. It's an interesting that you brought this up because there's debate as to when House of Dark Shadows actually premiered and came out in wide release. So the House of Dark Shadows had screenings in August of 1970. These were early screenings of the film. And most people, and I think even Wikipedia and everything, cites the date of release as October 28th, 1970, right before Halloween. That's, I think, when the movie was released in Manhattan and Los Angeles. I think that was when it was like 2 big screenings for the film. But the film was already in wide release through September. It was already playing in a whole bunch of drive-ins and movie theaters in September even. So some people say it's September because it was already in a lot of theaters. So, some people say October because of the big releases in New York and Los Angeles. So, I mean, the way they released movies at that time, I think was maybe a little bit different. It was kind of more staggered. So if we're going to look at it in August of 1970, it was the summer of 1970 storyline was going on with Gerard and Daphne, with Kate Jackson and James Storm. There were ghosts and Collinwood, and we had the vampire Roxanne going on that storyline. But by late September and October of 1970, we were already in the 1840 storyline with the head of Judah Zachary and the origin of Gerard and how he becomes possessed by Judah Zachary. And remember, Julia goes down the stairway through time into 1840. Ben is old at that point. So in October of 1970, we were already in 1840. But prior to that, we were in the summer of 1970 storyline with Gerard's ghost summoning the zombie pirates to come and destroy Collinwood, and them trying to prevent the destruction of Collinwood during that time. Quentin being in love with the ghost of Daphne, that Beckoning Fair One story that they did with Quentin being obsessed with the ghost of Daphne. That was when there were definitely screenings of the film going on, and then going into 1840. So it was right around then.
The reason I ask is I can see people that did not watch the show that watched the movie, and then they wanted to start watching the show. You want to have, nowadays, everybody be looking at the synergy. You want to have a storyline that's somewhat similar to what they just saw in the movie so they could be that gateway to get them hooked. And it sounds like it was not the stories that probably would dovetail perfectly with the movie, Which could be good and
point,
bad.
yeah.
It could be good for Dark Shadows fans because they're getting something different in the theaters, but they probably would have gone either way. But for somebody that's doing the reverse, they're like, okay, how come they're not focusing on the vampire? I've heard there was a werewolf. Where's the werewolf? There's certain things that the average person, when you talk about Dark Shadows that didn't watch it, they know there's a vampire in there or there's a werewolf. But it's like, oh, it's a ghost. Oh, it's another ghost. So I'm just wondering if maybe maybe it didn't get as much people coming from the movie to that as they could have if it would have been a more of a vampire focused storyline through that time period. So I'm just spitballing. I don't know, but I'm just wondering.
I could see that being, I think Dark Shadows was pretty popular, so a lot of people knew what it was, but I think if you're going from the movie and that was your first exposure to it and you're like, oh, I got to see what happens in the show now, it's definitely a totally different thing happening at that. There were still vampires at that time, but it's a very different, like, oh, all these characters died in the movie, but yet here's Carolyn right here, she's still alive. And Barnabas was a vampire, but he's trying to save the Collins family and he's not killing everyone off. And so it's, and Julie and Barnabas are allies here instead of, so they might, if they went in cold into the show from that, or if it was already in 1840, now we're in the 19th century in the past, and it's like, what is going on here? Like, this wasn't in the movie. They were not in the 19th century in the movie, but they may have. I could see somebody checking it out and then maybe asking someone else, like the other kids at school, like, oh, I saw the movie and the show. This is what's going on in the show, and maybe they could get filled in on that and what was going on. But that would be an interesting thing to hear about somebody who first discovered Dark Shadows through House of Dark Shadows and then tried to watch the show, and if they were confused at that point and how they adjusted to the events of the show. There's also another thing that we didn't bring up. Dan Curtis was trying to get a Dark Shadows movie made already. When Dark Shadows became really popular, he started thinking about a movie already in 1968. He was already trying to get it off the ground. And initially, when it got approved, that he was going to make a movie, his original plan, which is bananas, was he was going to take episodes of the show and cut them into a movie. He was going to actually use shot on video TV episodes and cut them together into a feature film, which that idea didn't last long. It was kind of, he came up with it and he was going to do it. And then it got dropped pretty quickly, but just the fact that he would even I can't even imagine, how would they have possibly done that? To sift through all those episodes and put it in, I don't think, maybe for a TV movie, but a theatrical release, I don't think that would have worked. Anyway, it's just kind of a weird trivia note to throw in there on that one.
I'm sure all the editors would have went crazy, and then there would have been another movie just by that. What happened to all these editors? Well, they tried to do this, and then they ended up going nuts.
They went to Wincliffe. That was the last we saw of them.
Yes. And then they had experiments done to them, and now it's going to be a new type of TV series that's coming out. But no, I think overall, I really enjoyed the movie. I've enjoyed the movie when I saw it before. There are things I thought could have been better with it, but I think it was a good thing to do. I'm glad that it's out there, because otherwise all we'd have is the TV series, with these original people. So I'm glad there's this movie and the next movie, which the second movie, which we're not talking about really today, is way different than the prior two. Mm-hmm. It's all ghost stories and supernatural and really involving different things. And maybe one day we'll come back and revisit that part to it. I know Derek's show, they did all these movies, I think when they did Dan Sember back 5 years ago, something like that. So I know Derek's done this before, and I think the movie you and I are talking about, him and Jeff Owens talked about prior. So Jeff is back, in a sense, with us, with Derek at that time, in a parallel universe.
Indeed, yes.
And if you also want to get a feel for more about Dark Shadows and all the stuff that's encompassing with it, you got to listen to, or watch if you're doing it on YouTube, and listen to Turek Collinwood with Penny Dreadful.
Well, thank you, Steve. It's been a pleasure talking with you about House of Dark Shadows. And I did do a House of Dark Shadows discussion on Terror at Collinwood with Ricardo Delgado, the artist. He's done the Dracula of Transylvania book, and he's does art design for films and television. He's an amazing guy.
Definitely check it out.
So, it's been an absolute pleasure, Steve and Derek, and I look forward to chatting with you too at some point in the future.
Well, that brings us to the end of this episode of Bride of Monster Kid Radio. I want to give a huge thanks to Penny and Steve. Steve Turek does the Diecast Movie Podcast. You can find that basically anywhere you can download podcasts. Look it up. Let him know that you heard about him here on the Bride of Monster Kid Radio. Steve's a good guy, and I love that he went out of his way to create some episodes for me. And, we still have a few more in the hopper, so you'll hear Steve again in the future. As far as Penny Dreadful goes, make sure you check out her podcast, The Terror at Collinwood. Just look up Terror at Collinwood on YouTube. Again, link in the show notes. And where do you find the show notes? Over on our website at monsterkidradio.net, where you're going to find links to everything we've talked about here on the show. You want to see what Mark Maskey's up to? Well, you got a link for that too. Also, we have an Amazon affiliate link. If you're going to buy anything on Amazon, please consider using that Amazon affiliate link, because every time you do that, you help us out here at Bride of Monster Kid Radio and Team Death, and it means the world to us to know that you have our back this way. You can also get involved with us on all the social medias. We're there. Facebook, X, Instagram, Blue Sky, Reddit, Patreon, Discord. We're all over the place. We'd love to interact with you online between episodes. Would really like to get our Reddit going, and patreon.com/monsterkidradio. I'm going to start slowly, and I've already talked about this in the previous episodes. We're going to start doing a lot of our announcements and other things over there because, well, personal reasons involving Meta, Mark Zuckerberg, and, the underground reptile cabal that he's part of. I just would love to kind of move things over to Patreon. Now, here's the thing about Patreon. Yes, we have a Patreon. Yes, you can become a patron, but you can also follow us on patreon.com/monsterkidradio for free. And we would love to have you over there as well. Plus, if you follow us over there and we get more and more followers, I don't know how the algorithm works over there on Patreon, but maybe we'll get pushed to more viewers and listeners and more Monster Kids, and the more, the merrier. You know what else is merry once you add more to it? This is a weird metaphor, but you know what else makes me merry? Kaiju movies. And next week, Beth is going to be back on the show, and we're going to continue her kaiju education, the kaiju education of Miss Beth, with Rodan.
When he moves, the whole earth quivers and quakes, and an abyss of horror opens up. See these prehistoric beasts emerge from the bowels of the earth after 200 million years to devastate mankind. Supersonic jets cannot catch him. Rockets cannot stop him. Armored tanks are helpless before him. Even guided missiles are powerless. See Rodan destroy a modern city, leveling it to the earth with a killing airstream of his mighty wings.
So that's coming up next week here on the show. If you have any thoughts about Rodan, I would love to include them in the mix. monsterkidradio@gmail.com, or you can call and leave us a voicemail at 360-524-2484. Bride of Monster Kid Radio is a Team Death production. All original content of Bride of Monster Kid Radio is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 Unported license. You can learn more about Team Death, our other projects like Death Designs, Mail Order Zombie, the Team Death YouTube channel, and more at www.teamdeath.com. Remember, death is spelled D-E-T-H. All previous episodes of this podcast, as well as the original Monster Kid Radio podcast, are available at www.monsterkidradio.net. Please rate and review Bride of Monster Kid Radio wherever you download your favorite podcasts. Boneyard Beach is copyright 2025, The Creepy Tikis. You can find it on their EP Doom Lagoon, which you can pick up over at thecreepytikis.bandcamp.com. Remember, creepy is spelled with a K, or you can just follow the link in the show notes, or you can look them up on Facebook, or even YouTube. They actually have a music video up for one of their songs with lyrics. Normally we do instrumental stuff here on the show, but it's pretty cool too, so go check it out. For now, we're going to go out on Boneyard Beach, which is an instrumental surf song. It's one of my favorites that I found so far this year. Big thanks to the band for letting us play their music here on the show. Big thanks to you for listening to the show, and I'll talk to everybody next week. Ciao.